everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm the City Witch. So as I'm new to YouTube, I just thought I'd do an introduction video to explain to you a little bit about myself, my spiritual path, and how I decided to become a witch. So to get started, I think I'll start at the very beginning when I was quite young. So I started seeing things like fairies and auras when I was around 4 years old. I think my parents just put it down to, oh, she's young and she's into some imaginary friends and she's just got a wild imagination. So as parents do, they just put it down to that. But when I started getting a little bit older and I was still adamant that I was seeing these things, they quickly realised actually she's a little bit old now and she shouldn't really be having these experiences. So I was actually told to grow up a few times, you're too old to have an imaginary friend. And then I started getting really accurate with my readings and predictions to the point where I was starting to say to them, look, I'm having these dreams and they're happening. So as an experiment, we wrote down one of the dreams that I had. And within a matter of days, it happened almost word for word how I predicted it would. And I started dream interpretation on my own. It was a fascinating subject that I was into. My dad bought me a book on it and I became very, very good at that. So they quickly realised that actually what I was telling them was the truth, that I obviously had some kind of really weird psychic powers that they didn't know about and abilities. And as they're not religious or spiritual in any way, they didn't know how to help or advise. So that led me to my very first mentor. So I was about 7 years old when I had my first mentor. He was a Native American man with a Native American heritage, and he was also a shaman, and my very first path was to learn how to be a shaman. So I didn't start in witchcraft straight away. I started learning to walk the path of a shaman and learn shamanism from an actual shaman. And actually I discovered a lot about my own personal heritage around that time. So I was informed by my mum that her maiden name, which is Kettle, was connected to a group of Indians that travelled over from America. So I did some research into this, being a little bit fascinated with the help of my mentor, and I actually discovered that Chief Kettle with his son was one of the last Indians to travel over from America to escape persecution, and he's actually in the history books, and I was able to locate that. So that was very, very fascinating to me. So I actually had a history straight away of Native American culture, and I have it in my bloodline. So that was really interesting, and it spurred me on a little bit into the path that I was currently walking at the time. So I probably studied under this mentor till I was about 10, 11 years old, somewhere there. I was with him for quite a while. He was a lovely man. I learned an awful lot from him. I really excelled under his tutelage. But unfortunately he became quite poorly. He had a really rare medical condition, and I can't actually remember what it was called now because it was a long time ago when I was very young, but I know that it was aggravated and brought on by cold, damp weather. And as we live in the UK, because that's where I am, I'm in England, the weather is pretty bad here, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. It's cold all the time, it's miserable all the time, and the weather's actually getting worse as the years have gone on, and it's usually freezing all the time. So I can completely understand why he was advised that he needed to move to warmer climates, and he needed to be in a kind of atmosphere that was warm all the time, or at least humid, so that his condition wasn't aggravated. So he ended up moving to Canada, and I believe that's where he is now. So if he chooses to be a follower, because I have asked him to be, hi, just thought I'd give him a bit of a shout out there. But yeah, so he moved away. So my very first mentor no longer was around anymore, so I was left pretty much on my own. Now, when I was 7 years old and I first got introduced to him, I also located my mum's tarot deck. Now, she was given this tarot deck by a Romany gypsy when she was young, and she didn't play with it, to be honest. She just, I think she messed around with her friends for a little bit trying to figure out how to do it, and then it went in a drawer somewhere, and I found it. So I asked her if I could have it. I mean, she was always finding me playing with it and playing with the cards and looking at the artwork, and it was a really, really beautiful old-fashioned style of deck. And of course I didn't know anything about tarot, so she said, yeah, okay, you can have it. So my mentor, even though he was a shaman, he knew what the tarot was, he understood it, so he gave me a book on it. So I started studying tarot when I was 7 years old. And please don't judge me, but I'm 34 years old, guys. I know I don't look it. A lot of you are going to go, oh my God, she's not 34. But trust me, I am. I'm 34 years old. So I've been studying tarot now for 27 whole years, and it's a long time to be studying tarot for. And it's still one of my all-time favourite spiritual practices now. It's my favourite divination technique. It's something I incorporate every day in my craft, and I do tarot pretty much on a daily basis, and I've actually been doing it for clients now for over 10 years. I used to do spiritual fairs and psychic pub nights as well in my local area, so I've become pretty popular over the years and I have quite a strong clientele in it, and it is, as I say, one of my favourite things to do as part of my craft. So yeah, so I started tarot, started shamanism, and then my mentor left me when I was around 10, 11 years old to move to another country. So as I say, I studied with him sort of 3 or 4 years. And then I kind of needed to find another outlet. Now, when I was growing up, and this is going to be shocking to a lot of you, especially if you're young witches, the internet wasn't a big thing back then, guys. I've got to be honest, like, it was rare if you had a computer in your house, and we did have a computer, so I was actually quite lucky. So we could afford a computer in the house, but however, it was used for my dad's work more than anything. So as a kid, I wasn't really allowed much access to it. The internet was even, more expensive to have in a house, so if you had a computer, you didn't necessarily have the internet. We did, but again, it was limited to my dad dialing up and connecting to it and using it for his work. So we weren't really allowed to mess around with it, to be honest. And I think he was always worried that we'd break the computer. And as it was important to his job, he couldn't really afford for us to do that. So how did I find information? How did I study? How did I research? Well, I suppose the answer there is I didn't really, guys, not at that age anyway. Mobile phones weren't a thing. I didn't get my first mobile phone until I was 16 years old. I had very limited access to the internet. My school didn't even have internet at all because I would have been in primary school, up till 7 years old, and then I would have been in like play school, and then I would have got developed into primary school. My primary school didn't have any kind of, computers or internet, and they actually weren't getting them until I was in my last final years there. So everything we did was studying by books. So the only information I had was kind of to reach out to my RE teacher and kind of go, hey, can you talk to me about other religions? And of course, being in a very Christian school, because my school was called Christ Church School, they don't really want to teach you about other religions. They don't want to teach you about witchcraft in particular. So, not that I knew what witchcraft really was at that point. I kind of just was trying to reach for the stars, I suppose, and kind of ask people to give me a little bit of teaching, a little bit of guidance. So I really struggled. I'll be honest, I really, really struggled. Then along came Borders. Now, I don't know if any of you know of this company, but it was called Borders. And around where I live, a massive shopping complex called Cheshire Oaks was built. And I believe it's world famous now, so a lot of you will probably recognise the name. And at the time, there was this massive bookstore built on the back of Cheshire Oaks, which was the Coliseum complex. And it changed my life, guys. It was amazing. It was the largest bookstore I've ever stepped foot in my entire life, and I could cycle to it on my bike within 15 minutes. So once I was reaching the age of 12 years old and I was in high school, after high school, I'd get home, dump my bag, and I'd be off. Straight to Borders. And the reason I wanted to go to Borders so badly was because of the fountain of knowledge that it had. So even if I couldn't afford to buy the books, I still had access to them. I could still read them. There was tables and chairs there to study and learn. And it was great. And I could take my homework with me, and I could do my homework there. And then once I'd done that, I could just do, some studying. So average bookstores in the UK, ones like WH Smith, Waterstones, there's a few smaller bookstore companies as well, like I think Blackwell's is one, and they're crap. I've got to be honest, they're crap. You go in a bookstore like that and you will search for a section that has books on witchcraft or spiritualism, and you're going to come to a section called religion. You're very rarely going to come to any section that's called spiritualism or mind, body, spirit. They're not really, or they weren't called that when I was little. It was just religion. And then you'd have maybe one shelf which would have books on angels or crystals or divination or psychic arts, and then you'd maybe find one book amongst all of those that might be witchcraft based, and if it was often paganism or Wicca. It wasn't actual witchcraft. So I struggled. So when Borders came along, I was like, oh my god, I'm just gonna be there all the time, and I was. Let's say I'd get on my bike and I'd go after school, and Borders had this massive section, and they'd separated it into two zones. So you had religion, and religion was actual religious practices, and then you had spiritualism / mind, body, spirit. And the mind, body, spirit, spiritual zone was 10 bays large. I mean, that's massive. That's a lot of books, guys. And it was brilliant. And I would spend hours sitting in the chair that was in that zone, reading and making notes and you know, whatever I could do. And they had a photocopier there, so I would pay and use my pocket money to scan pages of the books of information that I found fascinating. And I'd make myself wish lists where I'd go to friends and family, and when they'd say, what do you want for your birthday, or what do you want for Christmas, I'd go, here's the list, pick something from that please. And it would just be full of books and authors that I wanted to follow, that I wanted to have my own copies of their books, so I could become really knowledgeable in the craft and understand, you know, witchcraft as, you know, a whole subject, a whole umbrella. And yeah, it was just a phenomenal thing. You know, I miss that store. It doesn't exist anymore, sadly. It closed down. But Borders was amazing for me, and you know, when it was closing down, it had this massive sale on where everything was like 80% off. So half of my book collection upstairs actually probably comes from Borders. I spent a fortune. I think I spent like £300-400 just buying books all in the sale, and I come away with a mountain of knowledge. So yeah, so Borders was fantastic, and I miss it, I really do. And that was probably the start of my true path to being a witch, because before that I was a shaman, and I'd learned about my history, my heritage, and I played a little bit with tarot, but I hadn't really actually practiced witchcraft at all. I knew of it, but I didn't practice it. So I started obviously researching the paths that were out there, the different types of witches, you know, so anything from Gardanian to Wicca to Draconic to working with fairies and angels and all sorts of different things. So I studied, and that is the key to anything really, guys, is to just study. So I studied and I researched, and there was a lot of contradictive information out there, I've got to be honest, and I struggled for a little bit, and I thought, how can I know what's telling me the truth? How do I know logically, you know, what's the right information? Am I being fed the correct information? Because let's face it, you know, the author, you know, isn't necessarily an expert on what they're talking about, and they don't necessarily have qualifications in what they're doing, and sometimes research is wrong. And sometimes we believe something because research indicates a certain something, but then later on, it's discovered to be wrong. Look at all the changes to, you know, the dinosaurs and what we know about them. So I logically said to myself, I need to find a happy medium where, you know, I kind of can figure out what is truth and what isn't. So in my head, I kind of came up with this method where I said to myself, I'm going to read 4 or 5 books on a subject, and if those 4 or 5 books, most of them agree on a certain method or technique or information, it's probably right, because they must be all getting it from the same sort of sources. They've all done research in their own way as a writer, and they've all come back with the same results. So if there's one book in particular that stands out against all the others and goes against what they're saying, chances are that's probably not the book to follow. That's probably not the one that's accurate. So that was how I did it. Just as advice for you guys, again, you don't have to do that, but that's just what I did. And so yeah, I built my craft from there. So my family friends by that point were starting to buy me tools and books and information, and I studied until I was, you know, probably about 13 years old. And then, you know, it was decided by me and my family that I needed an outlet for my spiritualism. I was driving my sister crazy because we shared a room. I wanted to practice, and I didn't really understand how, or, you know, what I should be doing, or even if I was doing it right. So I researched my local area, finally being allowed to use the computer and the internet, and of course by then I was starting to go to high school as well. So of course my high school then had access to computers and the internet, so I could go in the library, I could, you know, go on a computer, and I could access the internet and do some research. So I would do research, and yeah, I managed to find a local coven. Now, I didn't know that covens don't accept somebody who isn't the age of 16 or above. It's usual practice for covens to consider anybody younger not to be, you know, a viable choice for a member because they're too young and they don't understand everything. But I thought, if nothing else, at least I'm trying to make some friends. I'm trying to reach out to the spiritual community around me. So I went ahead and I contacted them. And, you know, me and my dad travelled off to go and see them. And, you know, we met the guy in charge who ran it. And he sat down and we did like a one-on-one session where he chatted to me about what I'd done, what I knew about the craft. And obviously I knew very little about the craft. Even with all my research, I still didn't have access to a massive amount of information. And my book collection was fairly limited. So what I'd read and what I knew of the craft was still very small in comparison to what's out there. So, but he was impressed with all of my history with shamanism and the path I took there. He was very impressed with everything I'd learned. You know, I knew what spiritual animal family I belonged to. I knew all about my heritage, my history, and I knew that, you know, my cultural background from my family, you know, had connections to spiritualism. By that point, I knew my family, you know, especially my dad's side, was spiritual. I knew that his cousins and that were all witches. So I knew that I had a family history of it and I'd walked a certain level of path. And I also obviously was very good at doing divination with my tarot by that point. So he challenged me and asked me to do him a tarot read and see what I could pick up. And I'm almost positive he deliberately shielded against me so I wouldn't pick up information, but I have no evidence to support that. So I did this tarot reading for him, and about partway through, he just stopped me. He just went, "Enough, you're spot on. I don't need to know anymore." And I was a bit blown away because I was like, "Oh, I'm in trouble. I'm doing this wrong, or he's going to shout at me," you know. Because I was only, you know, 12 years old, you know, 12, 13, I was still a kid at the time, and no, he was blown away. He was completely impressed, and he said to my dad, "We don't normally accept members as young as her, but actually I think considering she's not surrounded by anyone who can guide her and she's lost her current mentor, I think she does need that guidance, so I'd like to take her on as a student, and if the others are accepting of it, we will initiate her into our coven, and it'll give her a way to practice and, you know, study." So I went for it. So for 3 whole years, from when I was, you know, just turned 13 right up until I was 16, I studied with this coven, and they opened my mind to a whole world of things out there. I mean, I have them to thank for the way that I developed as a witch. You know, I had this great support system around me that you know, while I was studying, they taught me how to perform and conduct rituals correctly, how to incorporate ceremony into my everyday life, how to conduct prayers and meditation, how to dream walk, and how to, you know, travel to other spiritual realms. They talked me through how to work with different entities out there, such as angels and fairies. They had me practice, you know, spells with them and learn how to write spells. And it, you know, that to me was amazing because, like I said, up to that point I had very limited knowledge. So because of this as well, they were very, very generous with me. I got a lot of donations of books to me that they no longer required or didn't need. You know, on birthdays, they all made sure to pull in. They bought me things, you know, knowing full well that I didn't really have any, you know, money to do these things myself with being a kid. So I felt very, very spoiled, very, you know, very looked after, and very, I suppose, coddled to some degree as well. But I will say that my mentor was strict. He didn't just hand me everything on a silver platter. He wanted me to make my own mistakes. So quite often, you know, he would challenge me to go and do something. And when I screwed up, you know, I had to come to him and go, "Oh my God, I've screwed up. I've done it wrong, or I've done this and that's not what I wanted. That's not the result." He would then, you know, obviously say to me, "Well, I'm not going to fix it for you. You need to learn by your own lessons. You need to learn, you know, how to write spells properly and how to get the results that you desire." So he made me, through trial and error, practice and practice and practice. And I made a lot of mistakes when I was first learning, as I'm sure any witch does. And eventually I got it down, and that's when he praised me. When I did something right, that's when I got praise. That's when he would stand up and go, "Well done, that's what I wanted from you." You know, he never just handed me anything. He never just said, you know, "You're going in the right path." There was none of that. It was just, do it. If you do it wrong, fix it. If you do it right, figure out what you did right. And that's how I learned. And actually, I think my witchcraft became really strong because of that, because I don't just, you know, now I don't just fly in and do a spell. He taught me control as well. He taught me that, you know, mundanely, you know, you need to do everything first within your power to solve something without magic. And I don't actually think a lot of modern day witches do that. I think they just automatically just turn to magic. "Oh, I'm struggling for money, so I'm going to do a prosperity spell." Or, you know, I'm unhappy with my life, so I want a new partner to make me feel good. Well, I wasn't taught that. I wasn't taught that at all. I was taught that you work hard for everything and you prove to the universe that you're trying first, and then when you incorporate magic and you say, I'm at this point now where magic is my last resort, because you put all that hard work already into it, you're already working towards manifesting something. So the magic is just kind of like that ignite that makes it happen, that actually brings that thing into your life. And let's face it, when you cast a spell, you can't just sit back and do nothing. Most spells require you to actually work towards it once you've done it. So if you want, to be successful in a job interview, you don't just go in and think, oh, I've done a spell, I'm fine, and wing it. You'd actually still prep, you'd still dress nice, you'd still make effort, you'd still answer the questions properly, you'd still present yourself in a good way. That's just logic and common sense. So he taught me all these things, and he taught me how to appreciate magic for what it is and not just use it for every damn little thing in my life. And he taught me that sometimes, magic isn't going to save you. It isn't going to be the way to solve all of your issues. Sometimes, you do need to just, try something else. And sometimes the universe won't allow magic to work for you because, why should it? So I was taught very well by this coven, and I appreciated everything he taught me. But then I got to the age of 16, and I developed my collection by that point. I had a number of tools. I'd been to Glastonbury. I'd visited magical places on holidays with my family, and I felt like I'd developed to the point where I was ready to start being a little bit on my own, a bit solitary, which is something that I hadn't been for a long time, because I'd had obviously a mentor in shamanism, and then I'd gone from him to having a mentor in witchcraft. And in between that, I'd trained myself how to do astrology and astronomy. I'd mapped my own birth chart, and I understood a lot of the planetary influences on me in my life. So I'd worked quite hard for a number of years, and actually, because obviously I was at the age where I was thinking about going off to college, my mentor approached me himself and just said, there isn't really anything further we can do for you. We know you're going to go off to college, you're going to be separated from us anyway, so we're going to need you to concentrate on just being solitary and take what we've taught you into your own life. Obviously, they were still there as support, but it wasn't the same as it would be before. So I stepped away. So I said goodbye to that coven, and for the first time in years, I was solitary. And you know what? I really enjoyed that, and I went off to college, and I was my, lovely magical self. And I was shocked at what I was presented with. So this is the first time in my entire life that I actually was presented with evil, with negativity, and with hatred, and with disdain for what I am. And up till now, I'd never been presented with any of that before. I had never encountered anybody who was spiteful towards me, who called me evil, who shouted at me. And within my first year of college, I experienced all of those things. And I've got to say, not to be prejudiced against anyone, but all of those things came from Christians. And I was gobsmacked, because I've never been in the broom closet. To explain, a little bit more about my background, I've never had to be in the broom closet. My family were very, very open, very welcoming of what I wanted to do. They let me choose my own path. They had no thoughts or negativity towards that. My family's not religious or spiritual at all, so I could be who I wanted to be without fear of being condemned or, ridiculed for that. So I grew up in a very positive environment where I was nurtured and where I was, pushed to excel in the things that I love and I enjoy, and to develop and be my own person. So I was this very unique young lady, who so happened to be a witch. And I went off to college, and I encountered for the first time, like I said, true negativity, and that was a revelation for me. That was, what did I do? Why don't they like me? What did I hurt them in some way? And trying to figure that out in your head can be quite boggling. And actually, I suppose when I became 16, that was the first time in my entire life that I felt like I should be in the broom closet, and I actually reverted into myself and became a bit of a recluse. I didn't go out. At that point in my life, I didn't wear makeup. I didn't feel like I had to impress anybody or do anything. And actually, it was very lonely. For the first time in my entire life, I had to hide who I was. I had to change and conform to the norm. I've never had to do that before. I didn't know how to do that. I was who I was, and I loved it. And, I went from wearing, this sort of an outfit, looking like a rock chick and everything, to jeans and a plain t-shirt or jeans and a jumper, or leggings and a dress top, something that they would accept as the norm. And it was very depressing for me. It took it, actually, physically, mentally, and spiritually, I took a knock on the head. I became quite ill. A lot of illnesses manifested in me around that time in my life as well. I was, I had serious hip surgery when I was 13 years old, and I had to take a lot of time out of school, so I had to work very, very hard to, recapture everything I'd lost and to pass and qualify with my GCSEs and everything, and actually come out of school with a decent education. So I had to study and work very, very hard on myself at that time in my life. And then I went off to college, and I'd earned my place there. I'd worked so hard, I deserved to be there. And then I was being hated upon for a spiritual choice, which I didn't think was very fair. And it got one step further, actually. People would spit at me. People would call me witch, evil. I even got told that I was the whore of the devil at one point, which was pretty insulting. I chose one day to sit in a beautiful cathedral park where they had beautiful flowers and trees, and that was probably one of the biggest mistakes of my life. And all I was trying to do was enjoy my lunch, and I was assaulted by Christians. They they actually sort of attacked me. They came over to me, they surrounded me, they verbally abused me, they called me all sorts of horrible names. They actually reduced me to tears. I've never experienced such hatred in all my life. And they threw holy water over me as well. I got completely drenched. My lunch was ruined. The book I was reading was soaked and damaged. And they ripped the pentacle that was around my neck off my neck, breaking the chain, as if they had the right to do this. And, that was the point where I actually got angry. And I was like, do you know what? Enough of this. I have made a choice. I am who I am. If you don't like it, leave. Bugger off. I'm not interested in what you have to say if you're going to say such horrible, horrible things. Because I don't do that to them. I could take offence quite easily by the crosses they're wearing around their neck. I could just as easily say, well, who are you to tell me I can't do what I'm doing? My path doesn't teach me to be horrible to people. It doesn't teach me to behave that way. And as a human being, actually, you shouldn't behave that way. Everyone has a right to be loved, appreciated and respected. Everyone's got a right to sit in a public place and have their lunch in peace, regardless of what religion or faith or spirituality they're choosing to follow. They didn't have any right to behave that way or treat me that way. And actually, I was very surprised by the people that came to my defence that day as well. There was a lovely lady of colour who approached me and, shooed them all away. She actually helped me clean up, and she made me feel better. And another lady came over with her children. She said she'd never seen such a disgusting act in her life, and she was actually Catholic, and she said, I have no problem with you sitting here, you are minding your own business, I don't think you're hurting anybody, and I would never allow my children to behave that way. And she promptly turned to her children and said, that's how not to behave. You don't treat another human being like that. And that sort of, I suppose, renewed my faith in people a little bit. But after that, I was like, enough's enough, I need to hide. So I stopped wearing my pentacle. I stopped wearing anything to do with my path. I converted to jeans and a plain t-shirt. I started wearing makeup to conform to the norm at that time, beauty queens and all that. And I changed as a person, and my friends, the ones that knew me and knew that I was a witch, obviously were quite saddened by this. And at that time, a lot of them would come to me for help and advice, and I would freely give it. And at that point, because of everything that happened to me, I wasn't giving it anymore. I wasn't being helpful anymore. I wasn't trying to impress anybody anymore, and I didn't take any of my tools of my craft with me. I used to carry my tarot deck around with me every day, and I just stopped doing all that. And it was a real shame. My friends were really disappointed, and they tried their best to bring me back out of my shell, and I just almost refused. And I'd say for most of that, right up until I turned 17, I was that way for a very good reason, and it took me a long time to grow back my strength, my power, and be secure in myself again. And you know, my health actually started to improve by that point as well, and I started to get a grips on things in my life. I met a guy that I started dating, so I was in a relationship, and he actually was spiritual as well, so that helped me come out a lot more. And he wasn't as advanced as me, so he literally just started the craft, so I ended up becoming his mentor. Then through him I started mentoring a couple of friends of mine, a couple of his friends, and before I knew it, technically I was teaching. And I was like, how did this happen? And then suddenly my very, very good friend Mark just suddenly turned around to me one day and went, you should start a coven. Just like that. You should start a coven. Why don't you? And I was like, I've never actually thought about it. And I hadn't even for 1 minute thought that I was knowledgeable enough or skilled enough to even teach or lead people. But I thought, well, I'm doing it anyway. You know, I've got 8 people that come to me on a regular basis, and I'm teaching and guiding them and helping them and advising them on what books to get and what spiritual, you know, items they need. So why not actually teach and host a group? So that's what I started doing. So I asked around, and you know, at least 8 people were really amenable to the idea. So I started a group. So once a month we would meet up, and for, you know, most of a day we would perform spiritual practices. I would show them how different techniques. I would walk them through the year in a day, and you know, the different subjects of the craft, and we would do them one at a time, you know, starting with the history of witchcraft and how it came to be, right the way up to, you know, sort of modern witchcraft now, covering all the different subjects, all the different types of witches out there, and they would decide what type of witch they wanted to be. And I'd actually settled on my type of witch I wanted to be, you know, about a year before I decided to form my first group, and that was to be an eclectic witch. So for those of you who don't know what an eclectic witch is, it's the type of witch who picks and chooses elements from other spiritual, earth-based religious or practices and brings them into their own, making it their own spiritual path. So I don't have to conform to any one path. I don't have to be pagan or Wiccan or any of that. I could be whatever I want to be. So, you know, if I joined a group that was primarily pagan, that's fine, because I can conform to that and I can do that because I studied that, you know, and I take elements from that, such as, you know, the belief in a god and goddess and different spiritual beings, and work it into my own craft, which is what I've done. You know, I don't, you know, I'm not Wiccan. However, you know, if there was a Wiccan ceremony going on, I can easily perform and be participated in that, because I don't, you know, because I studied it and I learned it and I spent time understanding it. And just because I'm not specifically Wiccan, the beauty of being eclectic means that I understand that path and I'm able to do it should I so choose. And that's what I like about being eclectic. So I design and make my own path as I go along. So a lot of my group chose to be eclectic as well, with aside from the odd member that chose to be a draconic witch. One chose to be a witch of the fairy path, and another one was really into shamanism at the time, and another one decided to be a hedge witch. So, you know, but majority of them chose to be eclectic witches. So it meant that anything I taught or passed on to them was, you know, mutable into their crafts, and the ones that were very specific, obviously we made sure to incorporate those kinds of things into what we were doing, so it was fair for everybody. And that went on for quite a number of years, actually. I think I reached about, you know, 2021 before I actually started ending that group, and it was probably for the better, because by that point we'd all finished college and we were all going off to university or to, you know, walk our career path, and yeah, that was quite important, I suppose. So we ended the group for very, very good reasons, so everyone could go off and do their own thing. And shortly after that, I was approached again about starting a group, and I didn't really think it was going to work. I didn't think there was enough members or enough people that were interested, but I decided, you know what, I enjoyed it the first time. I actually excelled at teaching, and I suppose it's what my true life calling is to teach and pass on knowledge. And it's what I've been doing for such a long time, and I enjoyed it so much that it gave me this you know, this whole feeling of being, I don't know how to describe it, like whole, I suppose. You know, it gave me this very, very positive feeling, and it made me feel like I was on the right path, and it was definitely something I should be doing in my life. So I said, you know what, yes, I'll do another coven. So I did, and that coven actually ran for well over 10 years. So it went on for a really, really long time. It was really successful. At the peak of you know, that coven, it had 15 or more members, and its lowest only 8. So it never got as low or lower than the original coven, but it certainly got very, very high. You know, I mean, nearly 20 members is quite a large number of people for any one person to teach. And at the time, I lived in a tiny flat as well. So it was quite hard housing all those people. So we had to move around a lot. So depending on who was able to attend would depend on where we'd be. And at one point in time, we actually, you know, rented a space as well, because it was quite a big group. So I had that group for quite a long time, and I, you know, personally trained a lot of different people. I mean, you know, some of you might recognise the name, the Magical Hag. She was one of my students for many, many years, and I personally trained and developed her craft until she went off to be solitary. There's a couple of other people within my group which are, you know, not famous, but in my local area they are pretty famous. They're well sought after, and they've done a lot of magical training, and I personally have worked alongside them and helped develop them just as they've helped develop me in turn. Because something very important you need to know about being a witch, guys, is that you are always a student. You are never going to be a true master in anything, because everything's changing, everything's developing at all times. We're always coming across new and interesting information. And the fundamental thing about being a witch is that, you know, it's about knowledge, it's about seeking that knowledge, it's about understanding that knowledge and utilising it in our everyday life. So you will always be a student, and I always teach my students that you will always be a student. I'm always a student, and as I'm teaching them, they're teaching me in turn, because they are, you know, showing me different ways they've developed the techniques that I'm teaching them into their own way of doing things. And as new and fresh, more modern witches come along, the way that they're developing the craft is really unique. As I said earlier in my video, you know, telephones, mobile phones, internet wasn't really a major thing. Now you've got techno witches. That's actually a thing. You know, there's people online that, you know, advertise their services, and you know, they blog about witchcraft, and they use their phones as their book of shadows. And you know, I've got to say, you know, a lot of those techniques I've started incorporating myself. I mean, my phone, you know, I have Pinterest on it. I know there's a lot of witches out there that don't really rate Pinterest, but I do. I actually think for decorating your book of shadows, for lots of little tidbits of information, it's useful. And if you want to pin a spell that you like, it might not be because you want to cast it, but it could be because you want to remind yourself that that type of spell is possible, or that you want to write something similar, or you like an element of that for something else. So Pinterest actually is, you know, one of the tools I use. There are also now apps and forums that you can go on. There's one called Pagan Now that I use, and that is a massive community of witches around the world which chat to each other, offer advice and exchange information, and even do spells for each other. And that's very useful as well. I know there's a witch I follow on YouTube called The Witch of Wonderlust, and she has a whole coven online, and she, you know, you can tag the Witch of Wonderlust coven, and she, you know, you can post stuff on there, and you can communicate with her, and it's this whole community. You know, these things just didn't exist when I was first learning how to be a witch, so the fact they exist now is amazing. I love that. I think that's fantastic. So yeah, so witchcraft has developed in lots of modern ways, and each time I teach somebody, they're also teaching me something new as well. And you know, when I came across the idea of, you know, techno witches, I mean, I was probably about 18 when I came across that, and I was just like, is that a thing? Is that something people do? And it's because the internet was just this massive thing then. It was just blowing up, and you used it in your everyday life so much. I mean, you know, like I said, when I was growing up, I could barely access the internet because it was on one computer in our house, and it was a computer my dad used for work. So when we finally developed into having the internet in the whole house and having computers of our own, laptops, mobile phones, going off to college and university where those things were accessible all the time, that just blew my mind. You know, the fact I could reach and talk to people all over the world. And as I started developing my craft as well, I went from teaching a coven locally to actually advising and mentoring people all around the world. So that helped kind of develop and grow my business. So when I decided to become the City Witch and start actually turning this into a proper career for myself, I'd gone off to university and I'd studied holistic alternative healing. One of the main courses I had to do was holistic diagnosis, where I had to learn the anatomy of the body, and it was quite an invasive, complicated course. And I passed, And that helped me, start by taking clients in my house where I would do alternative healing and therapies. I would do counselling and advice sessions for spiritual level. I would offer meditation practices and focus, and I would realign chakras. And that started off being quite small, but then obviously for years I'd been doing tarot, so I was already going off to psychic fairs and going to pubs, and I was doing psychic nights, and I was offering my services there, and I was making pretty decent income out of that as well. So I decided to combine this into an actual path for myself. And for those of you who know me personally, I've gone through a lot of things medically, and my life has developed and changed over the years, and some of it's not been so great. I've got a medical condition known as Crohn's disease, and when I was first diagnosed with it, there was very little information known about it at all, and now it's probably more common now than it used to be. I mean, in my entire area of Cheshire, England, there was only 3 or 4 people that were actually on this programme and actually seeing specialists. Now every time I speak to somebody, it's oh, I have Crohn's, or I know someone who has Crohn's. So it actually has flourished and developed as a medical problem, but it's still not curable, and it actually can degrade over time. So when I first got diagnosed with it, I needed major surgeries in order to save my life, because I was actually dying when I was diagnosed with it, partly because it was misdiagnosed and they were giving me all the wrong treatments, but also because my intestines were so bad that they needed to slice that part of me out in order to save my life, because I was actually drowning in my own blood. Not to freak anybody out or anything, I was unaware. They thought it was just my appendix, so I went under thinking my appendix are going to get taken out, and I came back awake to being told, actually we took your appendix anyway, because that's something they do, even if it's not bursting apparently, but we also took some of your intestine. The surgeon actually recognised that I had Crohn's disease and saved my life. And he was very honest with me and said, if I hadn't have done something there and then, you'd have died on the operating table. You were so bad you were drowning in your own blood. So I would have been considered a level 5 Crohn's disease patient by that point. And that was when they officially recognised it was Crohn's I had, not IBS, which is what they misdiagnosed me with. And by removing that section of me, it reduced me down to a level 2. So there are 5 levels to Crohn's, and the 5th one obviously is the worst condition, the worst stage of them all. That can lead to catheter bag, iron infusions on a regular basis, severe medical problems where you're bedridden all the time. And I do actually have a couple of friends that are at that level, which are so poorly they can barely leave their house. So I do thank myself very lucky that the surgeon recognised what I had, didn't get to the level of what theirs has developed to, and I'm actually able to have some semblance of life. And I learned through some of my holistic courses that there are various different techniques I can use to aid my my condition. So one of the things I do is I drink crystal water almost on a daily basis, with various crystals in that actually aid me on a very daily basis. I use crystals like moonstone and quartzes and all sorts of different things that clear out my energy, help my body heal, and I absorb that on a daily basis, and that has been greatly beneficial. I learned to diet, and from a dietitian what I should and shouldn't be eating, and I started learning how to incorporate these things and things that I enjoyed that I can no longer have. How can I substitute them in my life? So holistically speaking, my medical condition became better under control because of those things, but also because it's not curable and it does degrade as you get older. Now I'm at the point where I'm 34 years old, and I was diagnosed originally at 21. It has obviously progressed, so now it's something called a reoccurring Crohn's disease, and that I've recently just been diagnosed with that. And what they've said to me is reoccurring Crohn's disease is a very rare thing that happens to people with Crohn's, where when they've had treatment in a certain area, so as I say, part of my intestine was actually removed from my body, and it was sewn back together, so the bit that connects your large and small intestine doesn't exist in me anymore. But that section obviously has tissue damage because of the surgery and obviously the knitting back together. So it's sort of scarred, I suppose you could say. So recently I got told that my Crohn's is known as reoccurring Crohn's because it's a condition that reoccurs in the same zone. So normally Crohn's will attack multiple different zones of the body and it won't just stay in the one zone. Mine's reoccurring in the same zone over and over, trying to re-kill the flesh that they've healed. So I'm actually in a minority of people with Crohn's now because of that. So because of this, I took a life decision that I needed to stop working, anything that was shift patterns, because I need to take control of my health, and I need to obviously be able to help myself at certain times in the day, and that means being in a pattern, in routine, and having a stable kind of life. So I'm very lucky that my partner has a very, very good job, so he's allowed me to develop my own business. So I've gone from just being a spiritualist and a witch and helping people in a coven setting to actually making this my life's purpose. So now I teach and guide people all over the world. I have a holistic diagnosis treatment centre in my own home where people can come and they can have treatments from me, and I will actually sometimes go to their houses as well, depending on how ill or what's wrong with them. And I also do my tarot worldwide, and I perform spells for people as well as a witch. So that's when I developed my business into being called the City Witch and taking on a certain persona, which is what I'm presenting to you here today as a YouTuber, I suppose. So that's what I'm at now, and that's my life journey. So that's everything from me becoming, going from a child who simply saw things, to all the way to now to having an actual career in what I know and love and what I've studied in my entire life. So let's just give you a little bit of a background on me and myself and my life, and how I've learned to, develop and grow as a person, and the type of witch that I've become. And I'm going to be doing videos over the course of, for as long as this YouTube channel runs, I suppose, that's going to give you information on witchcraft, various different areas of the craft. I'm going to try my best to guide you and help you all out there, especially those of you who are still in the broom closet. And one thing I do want to say about you all being in the broom closet, you're not going to be in the broom closet forever. I was very, very lucky. As I say, my family was very open to my life and my path, and I didn't have to hide it from anybody. However, I'm aware there's a lot of people out there that, are raised in Christian or Catholic families, or surrounded by people who are very, rigid in their beliefs, and they're not prepared to even accept any other paths, and certainly not witchcraft. It's still, I think, a pretty touchy subject out there. It's getting better. It has improved a lot since, from when I was a child. But it's still not as, known or as accepted as you think it should be, considering we're, 21st century guys. Why is it okay that, gays are accepted these days, and, bisexuals and, transgenders becoming a very large subject these days, but witchcraft is still ridiculed. I mean, I'm still reading articles of, countries which are actually still jailing witches, or persecuting them for being witches, and I'm thinking, really, we're not in the medieval era anymore, guys. This is the 21st century. Everyone's got rights, no matter who they are, no matter what they pick or what path they choose to follow, what deity they choose to believe in. We're all still human at the end of the day, and we're all entitled to certain rights and privileges that comes with that. So it still shocks me and upsets me, saddens me on a great level that there's still, people out there that, consider witches to be evil, inferior, nasty, tainted in some way. And actually, I'm not like that at all. I don't believe in the devil. I don't go around cursing and hexing people left, right and centre. I don't, cause harm. I do believe 110% in, being a good person. So even if out there, you're the type of witch that doesn't believe in karma or the threefold rule, that's fine, because, a lot of that is Wiccan related, and not every witch is Wiccan. However, I will say, that doesn't give you license to go around and just curse and hex people all the time. It doesn't mean that you should resort to being, negative immediately. There's lots of ways you can use magic and your magical talents to better a situation in a positive way, rather than resort to that. Having said that, I also don't agree with you being bullied or harassed or abused as a witch. So, if it comes to the point where you've tried everything to try and rectify the situation in a positive way, then by all means, go for it. If you have to perform some baneful magic to get that shit sorted, then go for it. That's what I'm going to say to you. But I will also say, as I say, that, if you're on the broom closet, it's not going to be like that forever, guys. As I said before, kind of a roundabout way, I know it's a long explanation, but, one day you will have your own house. One day you will have your own space where you can practice the way you want to practice. You can be who you want to be. You can be the witch you want to be, and no one can tell you no. No one has control of that anymore. So just hang in there, and use these videos as a tool, as a guide to help you, and just remember to be good to each other. Remember to spread love and light, and remember the old rule that if you smile at someone, they have that you know, biological impulse to smile back, and that smile could just make that person's day. You know, remember your manners, you know, remember to be a respectful person. You know, being a witch isn't just about, you know, doing whatever you want, whenever you want, and manifesting all the stuff in your life. It's going to make your life amazing. It's about also, you know, giving that forward. You know, there's this belief that I actually like from Christianity, which is about, you know, paying that kindness forward. And I think that's something that everybody should do. I think if someone shows you a kindness, pay it forward. You know, hold a door for somebody, give up your seat on a bus for an old lady. You know, if someone's rude to you, you don't have to be rude back, rise above it. You know, if there's people standing in your way, say the words, excuse me please, can I get past? You know, be polite, don't shove each other, don't harass each other, don't be negative, don't gossip about each other. Try and just rise above it and be a better person, and just be a good individual. You know, all these things. I mean, even if you personally don't believe in karma, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And for all we know, when we pass on, you know, you don't want to get to that point and they go, well, we're weighing up your deeds and you weren't a great person, and you go, well, I didn't believe in it, you know, because by that point it's not going to matter. They're going to go, well, it doesn't matter if you don't believe in it, it's still a universal rule. So maybe it's better to just cover all your bases and just be a nice person while you're able to. As I say, I don't go around using my magic banefully if I can help it. I don't go around causing chaos. I don't stand for bullying and harassment, and I don't stand for, you know, the truly negative things in the world. So when someone presents me with something where I truly think there isn't another option, then yes, I will defend that person, and yes, I will work my magic in such a way that it aids them in whatever I think they need. Even if that does mean resorting to a just dessert spell, or, you know, using a spirit doll in order to, you know, teach that person a lesson. Those things are very, very possible. But what I'm saying is that's a last resort for me. I don't just go and do it because someone's annoyed me or someone's just been a little bit of a pain in the neck. That's not the way to use your magic, guys. Be responsible, be respectful, and try your best to do magic in healthy, positive ways. Try your best to, you know, work magic in your life that's going to benefit you, but also the people around you. Because if you work a prosperity spell and you come into great prosperity, pay it forward. You know, if you see a friend struggling and they count out pennies to pay for a sandwich, go, here, I pay for that. You know, when someone stood in a queue and they're short a penny, help them. You know, when someone's struggling to carry their heavy bags somewhere, you know, if it's somewhere local and you know where it is, why not just help them? Why not just, you know, pay that forward and just help them a little bit? You know, we've all got to help each other in life, and there's so much negativity out there. There's so many people which are negative. Don't add to it. It's just my personal belief, and as I say, you guys don't have to believe the same things I believe. I'm not gospel by any means. I'm not trying to tell you how to be, but you know, we've just got to spread more love and light. I think there's so much evil and negativity already in the world. Let's not make it worse. And as witches, I think we have a responsibility, considering we do wield this power and we do have this control and we do understand how to manipulate energies, to at least try to be better people, to rise above everything else that's going on in the world. So that's all I have for you today, and I'm sorry that it's been a very, very long-winded video. I didn't really want it to go on for this long and be this long. I wanted it to be just an introduction, and I suppose when you get to the point of, you know, an experienced witch like myself, you do rant a little bit. You know, you get on a subject and you just can't stop. But it clearly shows how passionate I am about my craft and my beliefs and what I stand for. And, you know, if I am the right spiritual practitioner for you and you watch this video and you think, you know what, I love everything she's saying, then by all means click that subscribe button, because there's going to be more like this coming your way, and the videos I'm going to be doing are going to be really informative, hopefully, and I'm hoping to guide the next generation and put my voice out there alongside all those witches that are pretty famous that are already doing this. And that's what I want, and you know, I'm hoping one day to work up to write my own book and really guide, you know, the next generation. So yeah, so if you like my video, please click that like button. It lets me know that you did enjoy it. Please leave me some very good feedback below. I'm not saying it has to be positive, because if you didn't enjoy the video, that's fair enough. That is your choice. But if you did enjoy it, I would very much like you to click that subscribe button, because it'd be nice to have some loyal followers that can communicate with me over time. And if you need any help or support with your practice and you're still in the broom closet, I'm very happy to do that. So it'd be nice to meet some new people along my path, and it'd be nice to help and guide you along yours. So let's train and study together, guys, and let's be, you know, spiritual, you know, family. Let's be a family, because I suppose that's what we are. Ultimately, we're all connected, so let's just be a family. So until next time, I hope you did enjoy the video, and as I say, click that like button if you did, and thank you for listening to me ramble on about my life and how I became a witch. So yeah, I'll see you next time, guys, and I hope you enjoy my videos, and I hope you enjoy my channel, and I look forward to working with you all in the future. Blessed be good to each other. I'll see you soon.